put in Google Classroom already, so if you want to follow along on there, you totally can. All right, so congrats, you guys made it this far. Last class for C++. So today we'll just do a little bit of review and then we'll do a final project. Or if you haven't started on that already from last week, you'll get to start that. And I have a few like sheets, like Google Docs with some tips if you're having some trouble getting started or are stuck somewhere. But otherwise, I think today mostly I'll just be open for questions. And I'll give you guys some time to try and do the project yourselves. So to begin, before I introduce that one more time, I'd like to have us do a practice. So in this practice, you run a pet store and you need to check if you need more supplies. So in this case, if the number of cat food bags is less than 10, or the number of dog food bags is less than 15, you need to get more supplies. So hopefully this should be a pretty simple one, but make a program that has the user enter the number of cat and dog food bags and then tell you if you need more supplies. So just a reminder, we need to start with the header. So hashtag include IOStream, and then the using namespace std. And I'll put the link in the chat for the editor that we're using. So this page will switch for a second. Right. Oops, sorry. And you can start that project. If you have any questions, of course, let me know in the chat and I can help answer. All right, so I'm going to get started on the right side of my screen with the header. And if you guys want to talk, you can let me know what to do next in the chat or unmute. And if you need a couple more minutes, just let me know. All right, so I've done the header. IOStream and using namespace std are our standard namespace. So the first thing we need to do is have the user enter numbers, right? So I'm going to start by making some variables. Number 2 dashes is a comment. So I'm just going to do comment and the word variables, just so it's a little bit more organized. I know everything is. And just a reminder, what I'm doing right now is inside of the main function. So unlike that tip sheet I'll share with you guys, it's on Google Classroom right now, but we'll look at it a little bit later. I talk about the main sometimes. This is just the main. Everything in these brackets. So the header is outside of the main. So we did header, or the main. Inside the main, I'm just going to do my variables. So it looks like I need 2 different variables, one for cat food and one for dog food. And since these are like whole numbers, I'm just going to call them integer. So I'll go int cat food and int dog food. All right, so so first we need to get values for these numbers, right? So I'm going to start by asking the user, cout enter amounts of cat food. And then remember, in order to get values from our user, we use cin, input. So I'm going to input or get the value for the variable cat food. I'm going to do the same thing with dog food. And then we're going to input the amount of dog food in the dog food variable. So now that I've gotten the values, we need to actually calculate things or make some comparison. So I'm going to start with an if statement and say if, in this case, the number of cat food is less than 10 or dog food is less than 15, we need more supplies. I'm going to say if cat food is less than 10. And does anyone remember how we write the word or in code? All right, so we do the word or with 2 vertical bars, just like that. And then we can do and with 2 and sign. I think that's an ampersand. So in this case, I'm going to say or, so I'm going to do 2 vertical bars, and do cat food, or sorry, dog is less than 15. And then we have something that happens within this if statement. So in this case, if that's the case, we need to get more supplies. So I'm just going to output, get more supplies. And then end the line, so end L. If that's not the case, I just won't have it output a message. If you want it to output a message, you just say else and then cout and have it output something. So you can try this out. Just click run. And so it tells us to get more supplies. If I had done and though, and I put those same numbers in, would it give the same message, get more supplies? So if we did and, you can try that out. If we did and, it doesn't display anything. Because if we did and, then it would check for both conditions to be true. And since both aren't true, then it's not going to run that if statement. All right. So if anyone has any questions about that, let me know right now. But otherwise, we'll move on. All right. Hopefully that was a good quick review. Because if statements will mostly be, I think what most of you will be doing today. All right. So I just like to quickly go over rock, paper, scissors. Since this will sort of be similar to rock, paper, scissors, what we're doing today. In the sense that it's like a complete project and yeah. So with rock, paper, scissors, I'd given you guys a template. Yeah. Were you talking about, someone asked me to put the code. I don't know if you're talking about the rock, paper, scissors or the one I just did, but I'll put this one, the one I just did in there. And the rock, paper, scissors stuff is in Google Classroom under week 5. So that's next up. All right. Oops. I'll just zoom in so you guys can see it a little better. Oh, I have a lot of background noise. Sorry about that. I think my fan on my computer just turned on. I'll try to speak a little bit louder, and I think I can turn captions on. Maybe. It looks like I can't turn captions on, but I'll speak louder. Thank you for letting me know. So I just put the code in for what I just did, which was that example, where we basically just declared our two variables, had the user input them, and then we compared them with this statement, and then outputted the answer. So now I'm just going to go over the rock, paper, scissors thing, because this is sort of similar to what you guys will be doing today. So with rock, paper, scissors, we'd sort of gone over this with like a template, where I sort of gave you the header, which hopefully you guys know by now. And then I gave you guys a function that you could use. And then I had you guys try and call the function to make the game work. So the project you guys will be doing today, you can use a function if you want to, but I know that functions can be confusing, so you could just do everything in the main function if you wanted to. So right in here, sort of like what we just did in that previous example. So basically what I want you guys to remember is that in your project, you got to start with your header. And then if you want a function, you can make your function. Make sure you make your function above the main. That way it'll actually work when you call it. And then you've got your function if you choose to do that. So in this case, our function, we had a function basically to determine who the winner was. And then we were going to call it in the main. So I've sort of got that example right here where it said, in this case, it's a tie game if the two choices that the players make are the same. So if player 1's choice equals player 2's choice, then it's a tied game. That's what I said. Versus if player 1 has rock, player 2 has scissors, then we know that rock wins, so player 1 is winning. So all of these are examples of player 1 winning. And then all of these are examples of player 2 winning. And then otherwise, it's an invalid action. So maybe if this person misspelled scissors, or they did rocks plural, then it would say invalid action. And then what I ended up having us do, this is just my way of doing it. Obviously, there's a lot of different ways to do this. But in the main, we declared our variables. And then this one is initialized because we gave it a word. And then I had some sort of welcome. I think this is kind of nice so that your user knows what's going on. And especially if you guys end up doing the unit converter one, it might be helpful to say something like, this program is a unit converter, and then tell us what it's converting. So you might want to do time. That's the example that I'll show you. But you could also do something like currency. So you could do like pounds to US dollars to something else. Or you could do distance. There's a lot of different things you could do. But make sure you tell the user what the program does. And then if you're doing the unit converter one, I think it'd be a good idea to tell them what they can input. So should they write seconds, minutes, and hours? Should they write like SEC for second, MIN or min for minute, and then just hour? So you should let them know how to do that. Or should they just do the first character? So that would be a really good thing to add in the intro. And then you have your main code. So in this case, I did a while loop. You can see that right here, while, and then I put a condition. And that's so that the user can play again. So if you want to add a play again type feature, make sure you add that in the main. But otherwise, everything in here is our main code. So I had the get the player 1 turn, we got the player 2 turn, and then we just called the function. If you aren't using functions, then you'd have a bulk of code right here. That'd probably be like your calculations. And then if you want like a play again or use again feature, you could do that right here with like, do you want to play again? And put the play again, and then while play again equals yes. So if they say yes, then this will just keep happening over and over and over again. If they say no, then the program will stop. And that's what return 0 means. It basically just ends the program. So yeah. All right, so now I'm just going to go back to this. Oops. All right, so I sort of went over that within the rock, paper, scissors thing, but just a quick recap, and you can look at this on the slides in Google Classroom. But your project basically needs a header, some sort of intro, then then you want to get some user inputs for your values. So in this case, you might get the unit and probably the value that the unit is in, and then whatever unit you want to convert it to, if you're doing the converting unit one. Otherwise, you would want to get the letter from the user if you're doing the Hangman one. And then you want to calculate it. So in this case, that'd be like converting the unit from seconds to hours, or determining if the letter is correct for Hangman. So like, is the letter A there? And then you want to output your calculation. So you want to say the new unit, or in Hangman, you'd probably want to use a loop because you want to keep outputting what's left of the word. So say they guess the letter A, you want to replace every letter A or every star, or however you want to do the dashes in Hangman, with the letter A. So your calculation would be outputting whatever's left of the word. And then if you want some sort of plug in feature. So just a quick recap of our project options. The first one, unit converter. So converting between like temperature or length or time, something like that. And basically you just need the type of unit they want to convert to, the type of unit being entered, and then the value of the unit. And then you want to convert it. So this is a sort of a sample output. You could make it however you want it to look, but make sure you get these 3 different values. The current unit, the new unit, and then the current length or time or distance. And then make sure your output includes units. That way they know you got it right. The second project is a little bit more tricky. So if you feel like you're a little bit more comfortable with C++ or you've had some prior experience and you want to use loops and try new string functions, then I would do the second option. And in this one, you can see there's a few more steps, but you can take a look at this in the slides on Google Classroom and go through that. I'll just show you the sample output. So I did stars, but you could also do like dashes, like an underscore or just a regular dash. And then basically you have the user enter a letter, and then you uncover letters in the word. So in this case, the user keeps entering letters, and then it reveals a word, and then you let them know that they guessed the word. And you can have them have as many guesses as you want. I just said 7, but if you wanted it to be super tricky and give them like 5 guesses, you can go ahead. So yeah, that's the Hangman one. All right. So I am just going to show you guys the unit converter tip sheet I made. Basically, if you're having a little bit of trouble getting started, this would be a really good place to look. Just, when I say like output, just use C out. When I say input, use C in. And obviously this is just the way I would have done a unit converter, but there's so many different ways to do it. So you totally don't need to follow this, except the header. Make sure you have the header. But the first thing, I just gave some ideas for variable names. Obviously you can name them however you want to. Then I basically just outlined the way to do it. This is called pseudocode. And so this is essentially like the code, but without the actual code language, in plain language that anyone could understand. And so I sort of outlined what you should do, and then I'd like you to sort of figure that out by figuring out what is the actual code. So when it says output, what should you say for cout? And then I gave an example with this is sort of an outline for the calculating, but I also gave an example if I had done time. So if you really are stuck, you can look at this. And if you're doing time, then I guess you've got this. If you're doing time, though, maybe try a different thing. You could do like hours, days, and years if you wanted to. But yeah, I did seconds, minutes, hours. Or you could do it with a different unit. I'd recommend no more than 3 different units simply because you're going to have a lot of if statements. And if you want to have more time to I think it just takes a lot of time to keep typing it out or keep copying and pasting it. So you totally could do more than 3, but I think 3 is a pretty good number for now. So yeah, I'll let you guys get started. So decide if you want to do the unit converter for your small project or the Hangman game for your project. Keeping in mind we have like 35 minutes or so until the end of class. Obviously, you could continue this outside. But yeah, so if you are new to C++ or you found that some of the content, like loops and things, were a little bit more tricky, then I'd recommend you try the unit converter, since it's pretty much just if statements. And then if you are up for a little bit more of a challenge, then go ahead with the Hangman thing. And I'll put a little tips outline for Hangman on Google Classroom in just a couple minutes. But I'll just give you guys some work time and let me know in the chat if you need any help. And then I'll put a little discussion thing on Google Classroom. So as soon as you finish, if you could paste your code in there, that'd be really cool. Then we can try out the different unit converters or different Hangman words. I think it'll be pretty fun to try different people's programs. And then I'll put my 2 solutions to them at the end of class, so you guys can take a look at that if you want to afterwards. But for now, I'll just give you guys some time then. And it looks like I have some questions in the chat, so I'm going to look at those. But yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. And if you aren't in the Google Classroom, I'll just put the links to the unit converter tips and the slides in the chat right now, so you can look at those a little bit easier. All right, someone asked about the randomizing word thing, and sorry, I forgot to write that up, but I will do that right now, and I'll put it in the chat and on Google Classroom. If you have finished though, otherwise besides the randomizing stuff, feel free to put it on Google Classroom, and you could just let people know in the chat, and we can try it out. It'll be fun. So while you are waiting on the randomizing, or if you don't want to randomize, you can just like hard code is what they call it, your word into the code. So that does mean that if someone has your code, they know the word. But yeah, so you could make a string like string word equals and then have the word that you want to be decoded in there. I'll also put like a little Google Doc with tips for Hangman in just a couple minutes. By the way, I just put the invite link to Google Classroom, so if you're not on there, you can click that and hopefully you should be able to join. All right, so 1 second. I'm going to share my screen for anyone interested in the random word generator. So as you can see for Hangman, if you wanted to generate a random word, you can make what's called an array. And I put the code for this in the chat just now. But an array is basically, I'm sure you've heard of it in math, or you will at some point, but it's sort of like a list of things, but like you can almost make it like multi-dimensional, if that makes sense. Like you could do it like 2 by 2 or 3 by 3, while the list is like just one row or column. So in this case, we do that, and so what you can do is you can list whatever words you want, and then it'll randomly pick one of the words from this list. So in this case, there are 4 words. So see how it says percent and then a number? We're going to do percent and 4. But like if I added another word, then like if I did cow, then I basically, then it'll pick a number between one of these 5 numbers. Just randomly output it. So in this case, it outputted door. If we run again, got door, and then it got cow, and then moon. So you can put however many as you want, just make sure you count it so you do the right number for if you have any questions about that or it's not working, let me know, but I just put that in the chat. You can take a look at it. So if you're doing the unit converter, if you could just let me know in the chat, like how far you are, if you need any help, or if anything on that document doesn't really make sense, because I could totally go over it or go through it if anyone would like that. I'd just like to know sort of how far you guys are in it. All right, for everyone doing the unit converting one, I'm just gonna quickly go through the document for a second. Sorry, 1 second. All right, so for these last few minutes, I'm just going to go through the unit converter for those who are still a little bit lost on that one. But if you aren't and you want to keep plowing away, go ahead. And once you finish, I'd love if you put it in the chat or in Google Classroom so people can try the different things. And yeah, I'll post the code for Hangman, I think at the end of class or so. I'll just put it on Google Classroom then. Or actually what we could do is I could just go through the Hangman right now if you guys wanted. Do you guys have a preference? Would you rather I go through unit converter or Hangman right now? Then I'll just put the other one in Google Classroom. All right, then yeah, I'll just go through Hangman right now. That's understandable. I think that's a pretty tricky one. It has a lot of loops and for loops, like while loops and for loops, which is a little bit confusing. So I'll go through Hangman and we'll see if I want to. So someone's asking about the unit converter. I'll put that in the chat, or not the chat. I'll put it in Google Classroom at the end of class because we just have 15 minutes. So I'd rather we go through the one that it's a little bit more tricky. All right, so let's share my screen. Okay, that is not the right screen. It's not that. Okay, here we are. I should delete this stuff. Okay. So we're going to start with our simple IO stream and using namespace std, and then we're also going to include string. Sorry, 1 second. So to begin with that, start by doing the header stuff if you didn't do this project earlier and you want to follow along. And then after that, you can start by declaring your variables. So for this one, we'll need quite a few variables. The first one is probably the most obvious. We need the variable to figure out the letter that the user enters. So in this case, since it's a letter, we want to use the we'll use a character, right? So we're going to use char. So I'll start with that. Oops, looks like I deleted the mains. All right, there we go. Okay, so I'm going to start with variables. Okay, so our first variable is the character that the user is going to input. So I'm just going to call that guess, since it's just a letter. Then we also need a variable for our word that the user is going to be using. So for the word, I'm just going to call it word, or sorry, not, so this is the word that's going to be guessed. And for now, I'll just hard code it. I'll do the randomizing thing at the end if we have time. So in this case, I'm just going to do elephant since that's needed for my example. And then we need one more variable right now. And this is another string. This is our answer word. So this is basically what the user is guessing. So remember how I had before like stars and then maybe the letter A, since the user guessed the letter A, that's this variable answer. So for now, answer doesn't actually have a value, so I'm just going to declare it, but not actually assign it a value, so not initialize it. So now we've created our 3 big variables, so we need to ask our user to enter the letter. So I'm just going to say cout, enter a letter. And then our input is that letter. So in this case, our only letter variable is our character guess. So this is basically what we want to happen over and over and over again, right? Because we want to keep getting guesses so that the user can try and guess the word. So I'm going to have this loop. So I'm just going to put that in a loop, and I'm going to make this a do while loop simply because I know this has to happen at least one time, because they obviously have to guess once. They can't guess the word without giving me a letter. So I'm just going to say while, and now we got to figure out our condition. So in this case, I'm going to say, since I want the user to have 7 guesses, I'm going to have this happen 7 times, or while the number of guesses is 7. So you could like hard code this and just make it happen 7 times, or you could use a counter and a variable. So say like I have some number that keeps increasing as a counter, and until that reaches 7, I want this to loop to continue happening. So if I want to make this, easier or harder for different scenarios, you'd want to use a variable. So we're going to use a variable so it's not like hard coded into it. So I'm just going to call this counter, that's an integer, and I'm going to initialize that so it's going to be 0. And then I'm going to say while counter is less than 7. So that way we get 7 guesses, which means our counter has to increase. So at the very bottom of this, I'm just going to say counter plus plus. So that basically just increases our counter by 1 every single time this loops through. All right, so now we have like our basic loop, and we have our counter. So it's going to continue a set amount of times. So the next thing we need to do is actually guess the letters, right? So for this, I'm going to use a for loop. I know we've usually just used for loops for counters, but this is sort of a special scenario to use it. So I'm going to say for int I equals 0. Generally, we just like to initialize our things to 0. And then we do another part of our condition. And so first we initialize, and then we have some sort of condition. So in this case, I want this to keep looping while so first let me backtrack and explain what this loop is going to do. So this loop is basically going to take the guess from our user, which is some sort of letter, and then it's going to check every single letter in the word for that letter. So that must be super confusing to you. Basically, let's say I guess the letter A. What this loop is going to do is it's going to take the letter A, and it's going to go through the entire word elephant, and it's going to check if the letter A is there. So it's going to start at the first character, so E, and it's going to check, is E equal to A? If it is, then it's going to substitute E for, or whatever that star is in our answer word, for A. Then it's going to move on to the next letter, and it's going to check if A equals that next letter. If that's true, then it's going to substitute. If it's false, it moves on. And so it keeps going until, oh, that is the letter A. So it's going to say, it's going to actually change that in our answer. And then, yeah, so it's going to basically just go through and check our guess and see if it actually matches. If it does match, then I want it to update in our string answer word so that it actually tells the user that. And 1 second, I'm just going to look in the chat. All right, someone sent me their code. I'll look at that as soon as I'm done. Hopefully that's okay. Yeah, I can put my code in the chat like that right now. Let me know if it cuts off. Okay, I think we're good. All right, so right now we have the basics of our first loop, and we're starting our second loop. And this second loop, so this first loop, I should go back. This first loop is basically just going to keep looping for every single guess the user makes. But this second loop, the for loop, is going to check every single letter in the word to see if it matches the guess. And then if it matches the guess, it's going to change that in the answer word. So that's like the star, 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 letter, star, 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 so that it updates and the user knows how many letters it got right. So this is where we're going to use some string functions, which makes it a little bit more complicated. So we started by initializing it. Now we want this to loop for the number of letters in our word, right? We don't want it to go 20 times. We don't want it to go 5 times. We don't want it to go 2 times. We want it to go however many letters are in here. So if you have multiple words, then you need to, so in this case, it's elephant. So you could just say while I is less than 8, but in this, or less than 7, but if you wanted to do a random word generator, you might have words of different lengths. So I'm going to actually code that in there. I'm not just going to put a number. So to find the length of a string, just a reminder, you basically just take the name of the string. So in this case, our string is called word, and then you go dot, and then length. And then, yes, 2 parentheses. So I want this to continue while the letter I is less than the length of the word. So that's what I do. I is less than the word length. And then we need I to update. So we're just going to go I plus plus. And then do another curly braces. So now within here, we need to check if our guess is actually equal to the letter. So I'm going to say if, and then our guess equals, and in this case, the letter of the string, we want to use our string functions. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go word, and then bracket, and then I. So what does this mean? What it's going to do is it's going to find the position, or it's going to take the character, whatever letter is at the position of I in the variable word. So, for example, the position 0 in the word is E, because position 0 is the first letter. Position 1 is L, position 2 is E. So that's why we generally start at 0 for our counter, because then you can use that same counter to figure out the position of letters in your word, since the words start at 0, the positioning of them. So, for example, word and then the bracket and 0 would be E. Word bracket 7 is T. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So this is basically just finding whatever character is at each position in the word. So if our guess equals the character, if A equals E, or I guess if they're equal, then it's going to do something. So if they're equal, we want it to update in our answer, right? We want it, instead of a star, I want it to actually be the letter. So I'm going to say, if they're equal, then that position in the answer variable should change, and that should equal our guess, whatever that position is. So now instead of the star, it's going to change and become the letter A. So that is our for loop. And it looks like pretty simple code, right? Like it's very short and sweet, but I think the logic is sort of what's pretty confusing and makes this a pretty tricky problem. And then we have our counter that I talked about earlier, which basically makes this loop continue for 7 guesses. So yeah, let's run it and see what happens. Hopefully did this right. All right, so I'm gonna start with the letter A. Oh no! So what I forgot to do is have it actually output the answer string. So right now I'm having it get a letter, I'm having it guess. It does all this work, but it's not telling me if I got it right. So I'm just going to say cout answer. And I'll just have it. So hopefully we should have some space. No. Oh, of course. All right. So I do the letter A. All right, one more time. So what happened here is it wasn't outputting the answer because I don't have anything for the answer. Right now the answer is just nothing. So I'm just going to call the answer 7 stars because that's what the word is. Oops, sorry. Try and look in the chat. All right. And I'll put this in there after. So if I put, now it works. I just did not do enough stars. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. All right. Now we can run it. All right, so if I put the letter A, it puts the letter A there. Does anyone have a guess? I know we know the word, but... All right, so I'm gonna do E.
Can you copy it in the chat?
Yeah, I'll put it in the chat. But basically, as I keep guessing letters, it finishes for me. And yeah, I'll put that in the chat right now, so you guys can try that out. My chat isn't. All right. So that's sort of the basics of it. As you can see, there's no intro to this program. It's quite dry. There's no good job, you won, or oh no, you need to try again. Also, I didn't add the random word generator. I'll add that and put that in Google Classroom if you guys want to take a look at it. But basically, there's a lot of different ways you can customize this. This is just sort of the basic code. So hopefully you guys can try and play around with it. Because the class is officially over for the session, but hopefully you still get to enjoy some of my coding. So I'll put the unit converter and this, as well as this with the random word thing on Google Classroom. And if you can't access Google Classroom, I did put the link in the chat. I can send it one more time. Or if you just let me know, I can maybe email it to you. But yeah, thank you guys. I enjoyed teaching you. Bye.